Growing up in Utah made me a little bit weird, and I think the weirdest part about that is that I didn't realize how much it had impacted me until I moved out of the state. If you're new to my channel, welcome. My name is Tati. I make videos here about life with an overall emphasis on general health. But today I'm trying something a little bit different. How often do I say that, right? But the thing is, lately I've been watching a lot of videos by this ex-Mormon YouTuber whose name is Alyssa Grenfell. I'll link her channel down below. A lot of her content is about going from being a devout member of the LDS Church to leaving the church and how this process has impacted her and changed her throughout time. Because I've been watching this content so heavily lately, it made me kind of want to talk about all the weird ways that growing up in Utah has influenced me as someone who's not even part of the church. The first thing that I want to talk about is modesty and modest clothing. So like growing up in high school, we weren't allowed to wear spaghetti straps or sleeveless tops or anything. We weren't allowed to wear really short shorts. We weren't allowed to wear anything that exposed the midriff. And I think I internalized some of these messages about modesty as I grew up and moved away from Utah and the influence of the church. For example, to this day, I don't wear spaghetti straps like ever. I feel really uncomfortable in sleeveless tops, like I'm doing something that I shouldn't be doing. When I wear skirts, they are at most maybe 2 to 3 inches above my knee. I don't even feel comfortable showing cleavage a lot of the time. My husband, who is not from Utah, has made a lot of commentary about how I dress in this kind of like old school modest way. And he's right, it's not the most flattering way to dress, but I think because of growing up in the influence of the church, it's just the way that I feel the most comfortable dressing. I do see ex-Mormons who like really go through the process of separating themselves from the church, kind of shunning those beliefs and wearing spaghetti straps, showing cleavage, wearing short shorts. But I think as somebody who was not a Mormon and therefore is not going through the process of becoming an ex-Mormon, it's a lot more like insidious and subconscious for me. There is nothing that I am turning against, for example. It's just more so I don't feel comfortable in most modern clothing. And because I'm not going through this spiritual revelation of questioning things, I don't really question why that is. I don't like to wear overly tight clothes. In fact, this year, 2024, is the first year that I've tried to kind of wear clothes that I would previously be uncomfortable with, like this top, which is pretty form-fitting. But it's just kind of silly to me how you can grow up next to a religion and because of that, have it influence these choices that you make on a day-to-day basis without even really knowing that it's happening. I will say though that clothing is a really important thing when you are living in Utah, and so are things that signal to other people that you are not Mormon. I have had a lot of friends that were a part of the church and they were not judgmental, but honestly, a lot of the time my experience was that I would get to know somebody superficially and then there would be an obvious shift in their mannerisms toward me the second that they realized that I was not LDS. So they would be friendly, outgoing, and then they would realize that I wasn't LDS, we didn't share this faith in common, and all of a sudden it was like a curtain fell and they weren't as friendly, they weren't reaching out to me as much. So in a lot of ways, I feel like I also dressed to signal that I was not LDS, so I didn't have to go through that like eventual friendship rejection. So a lot of people in Utah who are not Mormons or who are ex-Mormons like me have tattoos. Tattoos are much more common in Utah than they are where I currently live, which is Texas, even though I live in a much more secular place currently. So it's common to see dyed hair or tattoos because really you're signaling to everybody that you're not Mormon, so you don't have to go through the process of disclosing the fact that you're not Mormon. However, in my case, as an ethnic person, it was unlikely that I was Mormon to begin with. The second way that I think the church has really influenced me as a non-member is that I don't really drink alcohol. I don't do drugs, and I don't think that's too abnormal to say. I think most people don't do. Well, actually, I don't know because marijuana is being legalized in so many states. I don't do marijuana. That made me sound very lame. I don't use marijuana or marijuana products. I don't really have any desire to. I don't smoke, but more than that, I don't really drink alcohol. When I was growing up and we would spend time together or go to parties or whatever, sure, alcohol would be present, but it wasn't so much a cornerstone of socializing like it appears to be in other parts of the United States. More so, when we would be spending time together, we would be doing things like theater or improv or doing activities together as a group. So there wasn't a huge drinking culture for me to grow up around. So nowadays, I drink alcohol maybe 2 or 3 times a year maximum. And most of the time when I'm drinking alcohol, it's to placate other people that I'm seeing in a social setting. So like if I'm at a wedding or a birthday party or something like that where I'm socializing with strangers, I'll have a drink or two to just kind of make things easier. In fact, we were at a wedding recently last month. It was the wedding of a dear friend, but I didn't know a lot of the people that were present at the wedding, and I was getting peer pressured into taking shots. But because I don't really enjoy alcohol, I don't really enjoy not being in full control of myself because I'm, neurotic. I was just like pretending to take shots, and my husband was getting such a huge kick out of that. In fact, when I first met my husband and we were dating, he was drinking very, very frequently, and I thought that was really odd. In one of the first times that we were dating, he went to a wedding and he had, I think he said 10 shots of gin, and he was like still very much sober. But now if he has a glass of wine, he will get buzzed because I'm not drinking, so he's not really drinking either. So in a way, I guess the church is spilling over into his life too. The third way that I think the church influenced me is in terms of modest behavior overall. I didn't start dating until my mid-20s. I wasn't sexually active. I wasn't really going out on too many dates until I was about 23, which is significantly older than the majority of the US population. I think, again, because there just wasn't really as much pressure to be sexually active because that was more taboo in the area. I would go on dates with guys and we would maybe hold hands or sometimes kiss, but there wasn't really as much pressure to partake in sexual activity with them. I'm still a little bit weird and like repressed when it comes to this topic. So, when my husband and I are in public, we will maybe do a closed mouth kiss, but that's about the extent of it. In general, when you're dating in Utah as a non-Mormon, there's like broadly 2 categories of guys. There are guys who are Mormon, and then there are guys who are not Mormon that you're going to end up going on dates with. The guys who are not Mormon kind of go out of their way to show how not Mormon they are by being maybe a little bit too edgy for a normal person. And then the guys who are active in the church kind of treat you like a froyo sample. Like they're just trying you, but they know that you're not the flavor that they're going to commit to, if that makes sense. So I would have guys who are active within the church that would pursue me thinking that I would be willing to maybe take things further with them in terms of dating, but it just like was so bizarre. Like just because I'm not of this particular faith that you are doesn't mean that I don't have standards for my own conduct and my own behavior. Utah is very weird. It's insulated. It's very homogenous. And that results in the fourth way that the church influenced me, which is my views of other people. For a majority of my life, I grew up amongst people who all shared a culture, and they didn't really have interest in cultures outside of that. They weren't really interested in trying ethnic food or in understanding the nuances of ethnic cultures because they had this fundamental belief that their way of living was the correct way of living. Obviously, this is a generalization. I had friends, and I still have friends that were active in the church and were not like this, but they were definitely the minority and not the majority of the people that I interacted with. So when I moved out of Utah and I moved to Texas, I had all these like weird beliefs about people that weren't correct. So, okay, like I guess the background here is I'm in an interracial marriage. My husband is white and I am not. So when we first started dating, I was like really hesitant to show him things about my culture because I was expecting him to be like judgmental or dismissive or to maybe not even have interest in my culture, or for other white people that I met here in Texas to be very similar. but they weren't like that. And I realized that like the biases that I had against white people were not really about white people, but they were about a very specific type of person that I grew up with in Utah. Luckily, I was in Salt Lake City, and Salt Lake City is the most diverse city in Utah, which I know is like not saying much, but at least I lived in Salt Lake as opposed to like Provo or St. George or somewhere else where there's even less of a population. Overall, I don't know, it's kind of a nuanced topic to talk about. There are a lot of positives to the way that I grew up. There are a lot of positive aspects of growing up in Utah in that I grew up feeling relatively safe. There were spaces for me to be where I wasn't pressured to drink. There were spaces for me to spend my time and recreational activities. In fact, I would say many more than most other states. I am very thankful for the experience of growing up in Utah, but I think I would be lying to myself if I didn't admit that it made me fundamentally a little bit weirder than other people. If you grew up in Utah or you know somebody that grew up in Utah, please comment, because I would love to hear about the way that Utah influenced other people. Like, was this just me, or did other people have similar experiences growing up near the church as well? I think it's just kind of funny because if you look at me, I don't really seem like the type to be like an overly chaste prude because I have tattoos and everything, but I guess you know what they say, you can take the girl out of Utah, but you can't take Utah out of the girl.